You're listening to Wealth at Work, a show designed to help advisors think, make decisions, and cast a vision to create a business for the future. Hosted by financial planner, author, speaker, and CEO of Advisor2X, Ross Marino.
Today, I'm joined by Tom Brinker, Director of the American College Center for Special Needs. Hello, Tom.
Ross, how are you doing today? And thank you for inviting me on.
So glad to have you on. We have a lot of common history and common interest when it relates to special needs. Can't wait to talk about that because I know we're not alone. But before we dive into what we can do as advisors to help out clients and understand the world of special needs planning, I'd like you to introduce yourself as far as giving a brief history and then let us know what you're doing right now.
Ross, thank you. Long history. I began my career like so many others in accounting. I'd worked at Coopers and Lybrand, audit staff, tax department, had left the firm to form my own firm with several colleagues from Coopers and Lybrand. Worked there for many, many years. The firm has about 40 people today. Left the firm to really pursue more academic interest because I had a life-changing event. Our oldest son was born, had a lot of significant developmental delays, and was diagnosed with autism and co-occurring disorders. So that was a game changer. And I felt that if I could pursue more of an academic interest, I would have more freedom to be with him and my other child as they were growing up. So I started writing more and more in the academic area regarding how do we as families care for those with special needs. And I'm currently a full professor of accounting at Arcadia University. And I've been consulting with the American College, adjunct professor of taxation, special needs planning, serving as director for the Mass Mutual Center for Special Needs Planning for the better part of several years. But I've been working with the college since 1997 in various capacities. I have thoroughly enjoyed it, but work almost exclusively in the tax area and working with our families. I currently have a practice, having left the firm, of about 100 families, Ross, that I work with nationwide who have children, adults with disabilities. And as we'll talk about, my experience being a CPA, graduate school, it's really about building a team approach to working with these families because some of the issues are so unique and every child has unique issues as well. So by virtue of having a child with special needs who's now 27, cognitively about 3 or 4 years of age, will forever be a toddler, I've personally had to tap into many of these resources. And like so many other parents and families like yourself, it's really baptism by fire. You're learning as you go along, you make mistakes, then you discover this is so localized that what may work in part of PA, I'm in Pennsylvania, may not work in another part of PA, or may not work in North Carolina, may not work in Florida. So truly a unique profession.
Yeah, and it really is a challenging, it's just challenging to figure out what's going on. And I mean that when I read this book, 30 Days to Understand Autism, that was my light bulb book. Because I remember going through, I think my daughter was 13 at that time, and we had been doing stuff since she was 2. And when I would speak to people and doctors would say, well, tell us what's going on. I'd say, well, we try a lot. I'm O for everything. And they would just nod. I'm like, everything we've done doesn't seem to have any positive effect. Could not figure it out. Then finally got the diagnosis. And I remember in the book they wrote, when you meet one child with autism, you've met one child with autism.
That's correct.
Right. And that's kind of the light bulb moment, is there isn't just this category where you can just say, well, this is what they're like, or, this is what they're good at. This is what they're bad at. Oh, I know some that are high IQ and some are low IQ. What's their IQ? Like humans. So there's all these different stats that I started learning, and it was really challenging. But what I found fascinating is I'm fine sharing with this. I went through such a long path of education. I'm still on it. I share it with people, let them know I have a special needs daughter. You have a special needs child at home as well. We're not that unique. So can you talk about what goes on out there? And also, what are the trends? Is this increasing? What's going on?
Well, clearly it's increasing. And I really wonder why, because you probably recall 20, 30, 40 years ago, we would hear things like 1 out of 10,000 children are being born today with an autism spectrum disorder. 20 years ago, 1 out of 2,500. Recent, not so recent CDC statistics of March of 2020 now, new ones are coming out, 1 out of 54 children are being born today with an autism spectrum disorder. But Ross, what's more alarming is 1 out of 6 have some type of intellectual or physical disability today. The CDC came out and said in the age group of 3 to 17, 17% of all of these children have some form of disability. And what's so scary is you look at these statistics, and I'm always hoping they're wrong. 1 out of 5 in America have a disability. 1 out of 4 adults have a disability. I mean, when you think about all the special interest groups in this country, this is by far the largest group and probably the most underrepresented.
Yeah.
So the trends haven't really improved. They've actually become worse over time. You've seen that boys are 4.5 times more likely to have an autism spectrum disorder than girls. And it varies by state. What I found so alarming was in Colorado, 1 out of 76, New Jersey, 1 out of 32, which would imply a pretty significant environmental impact. But yeah, the trends aren't positive. We're trending in a very negative direction, but we need more and more advocates for these groups.
I
Really
definitely
do.
agree. Yeah, I agree. And the challenge we have, I have to approach it not just as a parent, but also as a financial planner, because I speak with people. This is part of their world. And I need to understand what they're thinking, how they're feeling. There's a broad range. There's family issues, there's legal issues, there's financial issues. I want to touch a little bit on each of those, but let's start first with the family issue. When you have a special needs situation in your home, how does that impact the family?
That's a great question. There's a lot of conflicting information out there. Ross, you probably saw some of the same surveys that I did. We go back 5, 6, 7 years. There were a lot of surveys indicating that the incidence rate of divorce was sky high for our families. They were saying that if you have a child with any kind of intellectual, physical disability, the likelihood of you getting a divorce was about 80%, 90% in some surveys. More recent data indicates it's only slightly higher than national averages. Now, I'm not sure why there was that misinformation out there, but they also were saying that if you had a child with a terminal illness that passed away, that did far more damage to the family unit than obviously brought them together. But my experience has been probably very similar to yours, that a lot of families, if you have a good relationship with your significant other, they buckle down. They decide we're going to fight this together. We're going to explore what options are available together. So I haven't seen high statistics in divorce. I have seen most of the families I work with, they're pulling together as a family to take care of that child who has that special need. But there's no question the other children in the family may feel alienated. There's no question that there's a disproportionate amount of time being spent with that child who has special needs. I mean, I can honestly say that the overwhelming amount of my time with our child who has autism is far greater than my other child who grew up, left the home, is doing his own thing. He's at PricewaterhouseCoopers, he's a CPA. He's gone, which is what we all want for our children, to grow up and eventually leave the home, right? But there's no question there's a different element of stress on the family unit. There really is. And some families are far better at coping with that. Others, they can't. But interestingly, you saw these statistics too, and I'm working with the National Society of Divorce Planners, and I talked with them saying, yeah, that's not really correct. More recent data indicates there is a higher incidence rate of divorce, but it's not the astronomical percentages we saw. And you probably saw those surveys too.
Oh, yeah.
80, 90%. No, they've said that's not true anymore. But it definitely creates a different game plan for you. I'm sure you had different goals, dreams with your own daughter. And I felt with my son, I would take him to baseball games. We'd play catch. Well, that's not the game plan. It didn't work out that way. I'm not saying it's a disappointment. It's just different. But in working with families, the families do struggle because you and I both know that care is very, very expensive, especially the care that you feel may be optimal for your child. And we as parents want to do anything and everything we can. Our child, when we heard about some incredible breakthroughs neurologically outside of the country, we flew down to Mexico to seek treatment. It didn't help. But as one doctor said to us, well, the parents get better because they know they're trying every single option they can. And our primary care physician at one time was in Louisiana. She'd had incredible success, but it didn't help with us, but we tried. So we as parents want to do everything we can, but you're right, it's expensive. And this is just one piece of the puzzle.
I think as financial planners, the challenge is to understand that traditional goals-based financial planning, much of that is off the table because
Yes.
traditional goals, you can't even contemplate because there's an extra variable in there. And I'm not saying it from good or bad. It's just an additional variable. So you can use your financial planning software, but there's going to be uncertainties that you can't quantify how much energy it's going to take, how much time it's going to take, and sometimes how much money it's going to take. That's certainly challenging. So let's talk about just maybe some nuggets on the legal consideration. So if I'm trying to advise someone and I want to connect them with an attorney, which is really what we do. I remember in the CFP program when I was teaching, the class after me was estate planning, and people would say, is it really hard? Would say, yes, it is hard, but this is all you got to know, enough to refer them to a good person to take care of them. So you don't have to be an expert because it's intense stuff, but you got to refer them. Well, there's going to be legal considerations with special needs children. What's some of the things I might be able to bring up in a conversation to help refer someone?
And Ross, here's where the dynamic is very, very different. You need that trusted team of advisors. We're going to need an estate planning attorney or a boutique law firm that specializes in advocating on behalf of children, adults with special needs. You can't use that general practitioner. And like so many others, I had a general practitioner, very good friend, felt that a simple standardized document would do the trick for a special needs trust. Didn't quite do the trick. So we're using a boutique law firm. And again, a lot of us, we want to use our friends, our colleagues, but if it's not their expertise, you really need that attorney that focuses exclusively on special needs planning, can draft the special needs trust, which will insulate that child's potential assets from our government's grasp so they can qualify for supplemental security income. They can qualify for medical assistance. So the SNT becomes a valuable tool. And if it's being funded by we as parents, others that are not the beneficiary, not the child, it will be a third-party supplemental special needs trust, providing for those extra quality of life items. If, God forbid, there's a personal injury, you may need a first-party special needs trust. But the bottom line, you need to have the right legal team. But this is only one of many issues. You're going to need that right legal team if you need someone to advocate on your behalf as you go through the educational process, the individualized educational planning process, the IEPs. You're going to need that attorney for guardianship issues, perhaps in helping you with that letter of intent, that daily blueprint. That's why for a general practitioner, this is not going to be in their bailiwick. And there are a lot of firms today where the practitioners who are pretty much like you and I, they're in it because they have a child, a sibling, a friend who has a child, sibling, a spouse who has special needs. And they do a phenomenal job and they're very compassionate. But one point you alluded to is what's different here from a financial planning engagement is you really need to have the right level of empathy and understanding. And I've met so many incredibly talented financial advisors like you. If their whole client base is more or less a typical family situation, they may not be able to bring that right level of empathy to the table and understanding that little Johnny is not going to be going to college. So that 529 plan may not be the proper vehicle for him. But you're right, there are so many talented financial advisors out there that are now incorporating this into their practice. But the whole, governmental component is different.
And you mentioned how it's different from state to state, and I've certainly learned that. And not only is it
It's
going
different
to be,
from county to county.
Oh, well, there you go. Yeah. Can you give us an example?
I can, because we've had issues, and I wanted to retain an incredibly talented law firm from the DC area. And they say, well, we can't help you. You're in a different county. And when we went to apply even for a guardianship, the law firm we use in Montgomery County said, you may need to hire counsel in Delaware County where you live. And I'm thinking, well, one's a stone throw away from the other. So the attorney we ended up working with, and I worked with their firm, he knew all the judges, and the process for guardianship took us all 5 minutes, a 5-minute appearance in court. But the law firm I actually preferred working with said, yeah, we don't really work in that county, which is amazing. You would think they could cross that county, but it is very localized, different personalities, different judges. But it's like school districts, Ross. We've seen that where parents will look for that school district that has an enlightened special ed director. And some school districts are phenomenal in working with our children. And some, you don't want your children going there. You're going to have your child go to a private school or a special school.
So when we're going through your typical planning process, we may list out these goals, and they're going to be different for people who have special needs planning. Some of the questions I may ask, if I'm ignorant, would be horribly insensitive, because it's something that may be a dream of the people I'm talking to, but there's no way possible that it's going to happen, because that's just not their world. And not only could they not do it just logistically because of their family situation, the amount of money it's going to take is unknown at that point. Talk about some of the financial considerations planning for special needs, and what do advisors do about that?
Well, this is a hardship for a lot of families. You may have witnessed this. I remember early on going to a local high school gathering where they had special needs attorneys talk to the group, and they were families with children, relatively young children. And it's overwhelming for these families. And then when they started quoting their fees, people were crying. Because what happens if you can't afford several $1,000s for the drafting of those special needs trusts? What if you can't afford guardianship or advocacy? So for a lot of families, they do nothing, Ross. There's no question about it. There are families that do nothing. And the beauty is, if you have a financial advisor that's somewhat conversant in different areas, he or she can be an incredible talent to help these people and at least guide them in the right direction. But I've met many a family that have chosen to do nothing, and their logic is they're hoping for divine intervention. And I tell people the greatest miracle can be acceptance. Accept this. Now we have to move on. I'm all for that, but acceptance. But yes, I've met many a family that do not want to hire an attorney. They know what they have to do. They've heard about it. But if you've seen the statistics, and they're getting better, but still only about 2/3 of all families out there today even have a special needs trust. And I think that's on the high side.
I think so too.
I think 10 years ago, I saw one stat that indicated almost 90% do not have a special needs trust. And that may be more accurate, because we're dealing with a profession where there are no socioeconomic boundaries, and education is critical. If you're not aware, you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. And you and I both have learned that we trip over a lot of this because we're learning because our children have unique issues. But I wish I had an answer for that one. There are so many families that they can't afford the services of many of these advisors, and often the financial planners, depending on how they're compensated, maybe they're compensated based on the products they can put within the trust, maybe life insurance products. But it's amazing how many families are struggling because every discretionary dollar they would have, they're putting it into their child for medical treatment, or after school programs, some type of therapeutic assistance. And some counties pay for it. Others make your life miserable. You've seen all this.
Yeah, it really is. It can be frustrating. It's certainly challenging. Your typical financial planner, myself included, people generally meet us before retirement or around retirement, a few years into retirement. When you have a special needs dynamic, it's a different planning world. And it's a challenge because, again, the typical spreadsheet, typical math doesn't work when there's unknowns out there. And life has enough uncertainties to begin with. You're going to have a lot more when it comes to special needs, and trying to help people through that. It's certainly a challenge. Getting a referral to an attorney, helping motivate people on why they need to connect with that. I think that's important. It's what I need to understand more deeply. I certainly have my own experience, but I have to be able to communicate this because people are going into retirement. They still have to retire. They still want to have some type of life that's fulfilling. Got to figure out how to handle all that. The American College has a great designation. Can you talk about what the designation is and what it means?
I can. Here's the irony. One of our financial advisors for our family is a chartered special needs consultant. A gentleman I had met 10, 15 years ago at a conference. So I won him on our team. And there are a whole host of reasons, Ross. We need younger financial planners. My fear is that in hiring someone maybe 65 or 70 as a financial advisor, well, I'm going to pass away. Who's going to take care and advise my son and care for my son? So our financial planner is relatively young, late 30s. Great guy, student of mine. He's a chartered special needs consultant. Now that's a 3-course designation that the American College offers. The first course is about disability planning and lifetime planning. So it's from the special education perspective. It's being taught by a special ed professor who has a child herself who has severe disabilities. And that course turns off a lot of financial advisors, but I believe they should be aware of the nuances of different types of disability. Lifetime planning. This is not a one and done type of plan. The beauty of the planning involved here is we know it's going to change almost daily. It can't be something that just is set on the back burner and you visit it 5 or 10 years later. So that's the introductory course. Now with the second course, what's intriguing here is we start looking at the financial, legal, and tax implications in working with our families. We talk about the different types of special needs trust. We talk about the ABLE account, achieving a better life experience account. We talk about guardianship, broad-based estate planning, the letter of intent. And normally our financial advisors like this course a lot better. Now they don't like the income tax area, which is my background. And I've told them that income taxes are important, but I would not consider them primary because a lot of the things we do in setting up these trusts, we're not doing it for income tax reasons. And do not allow some income tax savings to jeopardize the availability of medical assistance, Medicaid, because you're saving dollars, but forfeiting tens of thousands of dollars.
Right.
So we have that as our second course. And the individual spearheading that is an attorney specializing for those with special needs. And the final course, I bring 2 or 3 professors together and we talk about current trends in special needs planning. Again, focusing on the legal and financial implications. What's happening now with the American Rescue Plan Act? How do these credits that are expanded help our families? What may happen with Build Back Better? It's intriguing, a lot of what's going on. It's a very, very unstable environment right now in terms of planning. It's got to be hard for anyone, estate planners, income tax planners, financial advisors, because things could be in a state of flux for the next couple of months, to say the least. But it's a very nice program. Now, it's not the be all end all. Where the American College and I have probably disagreed is, this is not a standalone designation.
Yeah.
It's it's similar to a concentration within an MBA program. So I want you to have that core knowledge first. I want you to be a CFP, a CLU, a chartered financial consultant, a CPA, a lawyer. I want you to have experience. See, if you're not aware of the basics of income tax, estate planning, investment planning, retirement planning, this is not going to help. So clearly, this is a tag along. It's not a standalone designation. But for the planners I've worked with, they're already CFPs like you, and they decide to pursue some additional educational courses. But I would say to anyone, if your financial advisor is simply a chartered special needs consultant, what else do they bring to the table? And I'm working with people that have master's degrees in social work. That's a great combination. People that have worked with those with depression, community health-based professionals, great background. But a lot of CFPs, CHFCs, CPAs are now in the program. But again, I want people to know it's simply a concentration after you've completed the basic core work. And it's only the tip of the iceberg too.
Yeah, it is. Well, thanks for sharing all that. I think it's a great designation. I'm a big believer in post-CFP designations because I'm a big fan of the CFP, taught in the program, love it. I just think professional designations have a lot of value. This one adds on top of that core knowledge, really puts you in a position, I think, to help people. Where can people go to get more information on the program?
Well, the American College, you can go to their website. You can simply actually Google the American College of Financial Services Chartered Special Needs Consultant Program. And this may scare you off, but you'll see my face there. And I have about a 2 or 3 minute testimonial about what the planning process means. But I've advocated, you'll see it even on the website, Ross, that, hey, if you're really looking for in-depth knowledge of, let's say, special needs trust, attorneys have some of their own programs, like at Stetson University. They can take graduate level courses in drafting here. But this is a great program. And I really believe that the financial advisors, your quarterback, they're not the only person on your team. You're going to need perhaps a trustee, a trust company, a CPA, an attorney. You may need a general attorney. You need a medical professional, maybe a Social Security expert. I've added a Social Security expert to my team because his expertise is on all kinds of claiming issues. I'm like, it doesn't have to be this difficult, but it is.
Yeah, thanks so much. And shout out to Stetson University, which is where I went. Fantastic law school.
See, I didn't know that.
Well, and I did not go to the law school, so I'm sure you could have guessed that. Think the program's great. Tom Brinker, thanks so much for being on the show.
Ross, thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Wealth at Work. The information covered and posted represents the views of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Advisor 2X. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investment advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.